Today we will look at a Conde Virtuoso build for open world content that offers very high sustain and damage, which will enable you to solo most open world content on your own. With this build, you will be able to apply tons of bleeding and other conditions, and you will have a lot of blades all the time, which you can then use to shatter, and it will also help with your own sustain. For the armor, we are using a full set of celestial armor with undead runes. For the weapons, we are using dagger, torch, and staff. All of them are trailblazer. On the dagger and torch, we will use sigil of strength and sigil of earth, and on the staff, we will use sigil of leeching and geomancy. For the trinkets, we are using seraph trinkets, except the amulet and one of the rings will be trailblazer. For the food, we are using bowl of truffle risotto, and for the utilities, we are using the Corsair tuning crystal. And you should also use at least tier 1 jade bot core, which will give you a little bit of vitality, and the higher your tier is, the more benefits you will get, including the vitality. For the traits, we are using inspiration 2, 2, 2, and illusions 3, 3, 1, and virtuoso 3, 3, 3. For the utility skills, we are using Signet of the Ether as our heal, Blade Renewal with Mantra of Concentration as Mantra of Resolve as our 3 utility skills, and our elite is 1000 Cuts. I will leave a link for that build in the description below, and I also have multiple guides that shows you how to gear up any character from scratch. You will also find the links for them below. Now let's understand how the build works, and the most important thing will be those blades, which are the 5 purple dots above your shatter skills. Anytime you will summon illusions, you will stock a blade instead, and when you summon a phantasm, it will do whatever it is supposed to do, and then it will be converted into a blade. And when we use any of our shatter skills, we consume those blades, and you will notice that every few seconds you are generating some blades out of combat, and that's because of this trait, which generates 1 blade every 10 seconds. We will also stock more blades from the Grandmaster trait Blood Song, which will generate blades anytime we apply more than 5 stacks of bleeding, and it will also increase our damage from bleeding by 25%. Now keep in mind that this has nothing to do with the amount of stacks of bleeding, so the description on this trait is actually a little bit awkward. Instead, this works with how many times you have applied bleeding. As long as you applied in total bleeding 5 times on any amount of enemies with any amount of stacks from bleeding, you will stock blades from this trait. And from the adapt trait, we will apply bleeding when we do critical hits with our blade attacks. And from the gear and food and utilities, we will have a base of 35 critical chance. On top of that, we will be able to keep up a decent amount of fury uptime throughout the entire fight, and our fury will apply a total of 40% critical chance. And so with those 3 traits combined, it means that we will be able to do a lot of critical hits, which will apply a lot of bleeding, which of course on top of the damage it will do, especially from the 25 extra damage of bleeding, it will also stock more blades. With this current setup, all of your shatter skills except your F4 will count as blade attacks, along with your dagger auto attack, dagger 2 and dagger 3. All of them are also blade attacks. And all of the hits from the 1000 Cuts elite skill will count as blade attacks. That means even though the dagger skills don't apply any conditions directly, because of this trait you will apply a lot of bleeding with them. And from this trait we will also apply vulnerability with our critical hits from our blades. So we are applying bleeding and vulnerability. It also gives us a buff that increases our damage and condition damage by 5% every time we use a Blade Song skill. Blade Songs are your shatter skills. From the illusion straight line, Cry of Pain will increase the amount of confusion we do from our F2 skill. And then we also have Maim of the Delusioned. This will apply Torment from all our shatter skills. And from Master of Misdirection, this will reduce our shatter skills by 15%. So those traits will also make our shatter skills even more powerful. And the trait Compounding Power will give us a buff that increase our damage and condition damage every time we summon an illusion. And in the case of Virtuoso, this will work with blades. So anytime we stock a blade, we will get this buff, and we will get a maximum of 5. And as we will see later, you will basically be stocking blades non-stop, and so you will trigger this buff all the time. Phantasmal Force will give us some might from our phantasms after they are destroyed. And this will synergize well with the stacks of might we will get from the strength sigil. Our sustain will come from our condition damage, because the adapt trait will convert 3% of the total condition damage we do to healing, and then the inspiration line will give us a lot more heals. Restorative mantras will heal for a very decent amount anytime we use them, and with this build we are using 2 mantras, Mantra of Resolve for the cleanses and Mantra of Concentration for the stab and stun break, and each charge on those mantras will heal you. And so you basically have in total 4 heals from this trait. Restorative illusions will heal you and lose conditions whenever you use your shatter skills, and the more clones you have, the more effective this trait will be. In our case for Virtuosos, clones are basically the blades. Illusionary Inspiration will give you even more heal anytime you summon an illusion, and as we explained, illusions in our case are basically blades, so when we stock blades, this will trigger this trait. Now that we understand how the build works, let me show you how you are supposed to use it. Basically, you want to use all of your weapon skills. Shatters is where a lot of your benefits will come from, and so this is something you basically want to use whenever they are of cooldown. Specifically, skill number 2, this will be the one you will use the most because this will give you a lot of conditions and this will also apply Fury. And then skill number 1 will also do a very decent amount of damage. So those two skills specifically are very good for damage and try to use them whenever they are ready. The ideal use for them is when you have the maximum amount of blades, however you don't have to wait if you feel like you need to use them now for some extra damage. Like for example, if you use both of them when you have about 2 or 3 blades instead of 5, they will still do some decent damage. Skill number 3 is very good whenever you need CCs because this will apply daze and that daze will increase based on your blades. Skill number 4 will apply the effect Distortion, which will basically make you invulnerable. You will not take any damage and condition damage. And the more blades you had when you use this skill, the more distortion you will get. F5 skill will block and it will do damage around you. And this duration of the block and the damage will increase based on the blades you have. All of those shatter skills, including the F4 and F5 skills, will benefit from all the traits we explained earlier that apply something on illusions or something on shatter and such. The passive effect from Signet of the Ether will heal you every time you summon an illusion, and again for Virtuoso that will be anytime we stock blades, so you will get much more benefit from this Signet when it is on passive. Try not to use it unless you are really low on health and you need some extra heals. Blade Renewal is a very useful skill and it will do two things at the same time. It will give you the distortion effect which will make you invulnerable, just like F4, so you basically have two skills that will make you invulnerable, and then you also have your F5 for an extra block. But even more important, it will keep stocking blades for every second of the duration of the skill. And remember that stocking blades count as summoning illusion, which benefits us a lot in this build, and it will heal you and it will apply you to do shatters, which will increase your damage and apply even more heals. So if I consume all my blades right now and then use the blade renewal skill, you will notice it is slowly giving us our blades back. What is also good about the skill is that you can move while you are using it. Also, while casting the skill, you can use other skills and it will still work fine and it will stock even blades. It is much better to use this skill when you are low on blades or you don't have any, but of course you can also use it for the distortion effect if you need it. Mantra of Concentration is very good for stability or for stun breaks, and Mantra of Resolve is very good for cleanses. And because of the restorative mantra trait, anytime you will use any of those charges, it will also heal you for a very decent amount. So you can either use them for the stun breaks and the cleanses, or you can just simply use them whenever you need the heals. 1000 Cuts is also a big part of our rotation, and we will use it whenever we need some sort of a bursty damage, and so it is usually a good idea to start the fight with it, especially if you will fight multiple enemies at the same time. Anytime you find yourself starting to lose some big amount of health, or all of your skills are on cooldown, then you can switch to Staff. And on the staff, we are using Sigil of Leeching and Sigil of Geomancy. Both of them are going to help a lot with sustain. Sigil of Leeching will leech some health from enemies, which will heal you, and Geomancy will apply stacks of bleeding in an AoE radius around you on multiple enemies. And remember that our bleeding will do more damage, but also more important, it will stock blades. And our blades will heal us because of the Illusionary Inspiration trait. And so Geomancy is here on the staff not only for the damage, it is also for the heals and for the stocking of blades. And whenever the Dagger Touch is ready to be switched to again, use it immediately, because even if everything is on cooldown and you just have your auto attack, it will still apply a decent amount of bleeding from it. Keep in mind that skill 2 on the dagger will apply blades from two things. This will stock a blade if you hit at least one enemy, and then there's also a chance you will get more blades if you apply bleeding. And remember that all of your dagger skills will pierce. And so there's a high chance you will hit multiple enemies with them, which means that there's a chance you will apply more bleeding, more damage, and more blades with more heals and such. One of the things you can do to make this build even stronger is make sure you get the buffs from the defensive protocol and offensive protocols, which you can find in any of the Kansa maps. From the defensive protocol, we get extra toughness and extra vitality, and this will also give us a lot of boons when we enter the combat. And from the offensive protocol, we get another buff that increases our power and condition damage. And on top of that, it will give us even more boons when we enter combat. If you want to know more details about how the protocols work and everything else about Jade bots in general, I have another guide that I made I will leave in the description below. And anytime you interact with any anvil or a vendor that have this name on it, Reinforce Armor, they will give you this new buff which is called Reinforce Armor, which will increase your toughness and it will increase your health. Another very important buff you can have is the Electromagnetical Pulse, which is a special action key you get. One of the easy sources for it is the way station you can find right beside the base camp waypoint in Drizzlewood Coast. This will give you a special action key that will enable you to CC enemies whenever you need to break their bar. And this is especially helpful when you are fighting bosses, hero points, and bounties. What you see right now is the 2.0 version, which you get when you have this mastery. The build will work just fine without any of those buffs, but they will definitely help and they will significantly improve the usability of this build in open world. I will now leave you with some footage for this build in action. And if you want to see more of my build guides for open world or group content or world vs world, I will leave the playlist for those builds in the description below.